Hello, third graders. Today we're going to listen to Lesson 2, Columbus and the Conquistadors. Our targets for today are: I will identify motivating factors that led to the exploration of the Americas in different expeditions. I can explain the significance of Christopher Columbus in the early Spanish exploration of the Americas. I can describe the encounters between early explorers and Native Americans. And I can compare and contrast the most important points and key details of Columbus's first and second voyages presented in 1492, a year that changed the world. We will now begin reviewing some of the vocabulary that you'll be hearing in this section. The first word is conquering, taking control by using force or great effort. For example, Maha had been conquering her fear of spiders by reading about how harmless most spiders are. The next word is conquistadors, the Spanish word for conquerors. Travelers, soldiers, and explorers from Spain who traveled to North, Central, and South America to look for wealth, conquer the native peoples, and gain control of the land. An example is: the conquistadors had a long voyage across the Atlantic Ocean from Spain to the Americas. The next word is immune, protected from diseases. An example is: the Native Americans were not immune to the diseases that the Europeans brought to the Americas because they had not been exposed to them before as the Europeans had. Quantities, amounts or numbers of something. For example, some farmers grow large quantities of corn to help feed people and livestock. Raided, attacked in a sudden and unexpected way, often to steal goods. For example, a raccoon raided our neighbor's trash cans. Trek, a difficult journey or trip. Elephants enabled Hannibal to complete his trek across the Alps to conquer Rome. What do we know so far? We know that Columbus was hoping to find a faster route to the East Indies to gain wealth and fame. We know that King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella agreed to sponsor his voyage so they could claim some wealth and new lands for Spain. However, we know that Columbus really ended up landing in the West Indies by the continent of North America. Columbus eventually landed on an island he named Hispaniola. He claimed that island for Spain and established a fort there. Key concepts for this lesson. Motivating factors. The reasons why Europeans explorers decided to leave Europe and to explore new lands. What were they after? Exploration. Traveling in or through a new area in order to discover new things. Discovery. Finding or learning something for the first time. The Northwest Passage. A direct and efficient route to Asia. Explorers looked for a Northwest Passage through North America to Asia. They wanted a fast way to bring back riches from Asia. Trade. The action of buying and selling goods that are not available or are scarce in your land. End task. After listening to the read aloud, you'll be asked to write an opinion paragraph answering this question. How do you think the Native Americans felt about the conquistadors in the Americas? Remember that a good opinion paragraph includes your opinion and at least 3 reasons with elaboration to support your opinion. Note-taking. You will want to use a piece of lined paper to take notes on as you listen. Set up your paper with the categories below. Give yourself plenty of room to write about the interactions you hear Columbus and the explorers having with the Native Americans. Also take some room to write down the different adjectives that describe the way European explorers and conquistadors treated the Native Americans. The purpose for listening. At the end of the previous read aloud, we heard that King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain had agreed to fund another voyage as Christopher Columbus's sponsors. Predict what Columbus will find on his second voyage. And how do you think the Native Americans that already live there will respond? Christopher Columbus made 4 voyages to the West Indies, convinced he had reached the East Indies in Asia. The voyage most people know about is the first one, the voyage when Columbus landed in the West Indies. In some ways, Columbus's second voyage was even more important. If you want to understand what happened in the Americas with European exploration over the following 100 years or so after Columbus, it helps to know something about his second voyage. When Columbus returned to Europe after his first transatlantic voyage, he was greeted as a hero. Word of his expedition spread rapidly in Spain and throughout Europe. The report he sent to King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain was printed in large quantities, or amounts, using the recent invention of the printing press. Thousands of Europeans read Columbus's report, and others heard the reports read aloud. Soon everybody was talking about Columbus and his discoveries. Some people were not sure if he had really sailed to Asia as he claimed, but they were sure he had found something new and exciting. Columbus was honored by King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. He was named Admiral of the Ocean Sea, and as he had hoped, he was given ships and money for a second voyage. The second voyage was a much, much bigger operation than the first voyage. Columbus had a fleet of 3 ships and 100 men for his first voyage. On the second voyage, he had a fleet of 17 ships and more than 1,000 men. When he was recruiting sailors for his first voyage, Columbus had a hard time finding sailors who were willing to sail west into uncharted waters. When he was recruiting men for his second voyage, he had so many eager, interested sailors that he had to turn many of them away. The ships of the second voyage left Spain in September of 1493. After a stop in the Canary Islands off the coast of Africa, Columbus and his men sailed west. They sighted land in early November. Columbus explored the coasts of several islands, but he was eager to get back to the fort he and 39 of his crew members had built on Hispaniola on his first voyage. He hoped that, in his absence, the men he had left behind would have developed peaceful trading relationships with the Taino, and that they would have collected a lot of gold. What Columbus actually found was quite different. The fort had been burned to the ground. The Spaniards he had left on the island had been killed, and there was no great hoard of collected gold. Instead of trading peacefully with the Taino of Hispaniola, the Spaniards had treated them cruelly. The Europeans had raided their villages and had taken many people as slaves. They had taken gold wherever they could find it. After a while, the Taino fought back, attacked the fort, and killed the Spaniards. Columbus decided to build another fort on Hispaniola and named it Isabella, after the Queen of Spain. He left his brother Diego in charge of it and urged him to find the gold that Columbus felt sure was on the island. Diego and his men found some gold, but not as much as Columbus had led the king and queen to think was on the island. By 1495, Columbus's men had become unhappy, and Columbus grew anxious. It became clear to his men that there was much less gold than Columbus had exaggerated in his report. They felt that Columbus had lied to them. Some of them had already sailed back to Spain to complain about Columbus's exaggerations and leadership. Meanwhile, Columbus continued to look for gold, using cruel methods to get as much gold as he could. He made laws that enslaved and punished the natives if they didn't collect enough gold for the Spaniards. What made the laws even more cruel was the fact that Hispaniola had only a little gold. There was no way the enslaved native people could supply the amount of gold Columbus demanded. As if this weren't bad enough, many of the Taino became infected with diseases to which many of the Spanish had become immune. The Taino on Hispaniola had never been exposed to the types of germs the Spanish carried in their bodies. Through interacting with the Spaniards, the natives came in contact with germs that their bodies could not fight. Over the next several years, many of the Taino became sick, and hundreds of thousands of them died of diseases, the most common of which was smallpox. Before Columbus's voyage, the Taino had a population of around 2 million. Between disease and Spanish conquest during the years following the arrival of Columbus and his men, the Taino only numbered a few thousand. By 1496, it was clear that there was no more gold to be found on Hispaniola. Columbus decided to make a new law that said that the native people had to help develop large farms called plantations and work as slaves for the Spanish. In just a few years, the Spanish were firmly in control of the island of Hispaniola. After that point, they began to spread out, exploring and conquering other nearby islands in the Caribbean. The men who led these voyages of exploration and conquest were known as conquistadors, the Spanish word for conquerors. These conquistadors were travelers, soldiers, and explorers from Spain who traveled in North, Central, and South America to look for wealth, conquer the native peoples, and gain control of land. They came to the Americas to find the same thing Columbus had been looking for in other unexplored parts of America: gold, spices, land, slaves, fame, and power. By the year 1542, 50 years after the first voyage of Christopher Columbus, many Spanish conquistadors had explored and conquered most of South America, all of Central America, and a significant part of North America. Christopher Columbus died believing he had reached the island of the East Indies in Asia, known at that time just as the Indies. When the Spanish realized this mistake, it was decided to name the area where Columbus had landed the West Indies, and the Spice Islands in Asia that he had tried to reach the East Indies. What happened in those 50 years after Columbus's first voyage? First, a conquistador named Ponce de Leon conquered the island of Puerto Rico to the east of the island of Hispaniola. At about the same time, another conquistador by the name of Diego Velázquez subdued the native people on the island of Cuba, an island to the west of Hispaniola. Soon the Spanish began to extend their control beyond the islands of the Caribbean Sea. They began to explore and conquer the mainland of North and South America. In 1513, Ponce de Leon explored the coast of Florida and claimed it for Spain. In the very same year, Vasco Núñez de Balboa fought his way through the jungles of Panama and became the first Spaniard to reach the Pacific Ocean. A few years later, in 1519, Hernán Cortés led a Spanish army into Mexico. He ordered that the fleet of ships be burned when he and his crew landed so that everyone would understand there was no turning back. He marched his army inland and eventually conquered the mighty Aztec Empire and his king Moctezuma II. The conquistador Francisco Pizarro led his men deep into South America, and by 1532 had conquered the other great empire of the Americas, the Inca Empire in Peru. The defeat of this great empire was due in large part to disease. Because the natives had no immunity to the diseases the Europeans brought with them, many natives became sick and/or died of these diseases after coming into contact with the Europeans. After helping Pizarro conquer the Inca Empire, the conquistador Hernando de Soto returned his attention to North America. He landed his troops on the west coast of Florida and led them on a long trek through what is now the southeastern part of the United States. At about the same time, Francisco Vázquez de Coronado led his army of Spaniards north from Mexico into what is now the southwestern United States, hoping to find the cities of gold he had heard about. In the following read-alouds, you will learn about the journeys of these conquistadors and other explorers, and hear about their bold ideas, their voyages, their struggles to search of gold, and their interactions with the Native Americans. Writing assignment. Now you're ready to open your writing assignment. Remember that you can come back and listen to this lesson as many times as you need to help you find information to support your ideas, and use all that good information that you've been writing in your notes.